Hey, so today I'm speaking with my friend and physical therapist, Dr. Cioce. She does pelvic floor health. She's a PT, birth doula, and a breathwork facilitator, energy work, encompassing all of these things. So thanks for coming on here, Zazu.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There's so much, and we talk so much that it's going to be really
We
hard
do.
to limit us. I had just mentioned in the episode I just recorded this morning, which was out recently, about my shoulder pain. It was like, Zazu help me to, get to the bottom of that, or at least start to narrow it down. And then through a whole team, a village of support, we got the ins and outs of it even more in depth. Um, so I'm just curious about like the spiritual journey and then your interest in PT and like however you want to tell your story. But I was thinking like primarily you started out as a PT and that just in the end,
Yeah.
like you needed more than just that structure. So I guess
So, yeah,
what do you want to
we'll just start there. Yeah, definitely. And
say?
that's such a like concise way to really say it because that truly is. I mean, I think it's so interesting and if you think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, it all makes sense. Like my professional journey and just like my personal spiritual journey have mirrored each other
Mhm.
in different ways and as I've grown and evolved, like, so has, like, my business and even, like, just my practice as a physical therapist because I only opened my business I opened it in November 2020. So, I guess it'll be 4 years, later this year, but,
We both opened in
um
November 2020.
yeah,
It was Open Moon Magic then too.
exactly. So, yeah, so it's like, we could that's a whole nother I feel like 2020 was like birthing of so many
Yeah.
things, but, yeah, it's interesting because I started my career out in a women's hospital, but I worked in the outpatient. I actually worked in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived there for 4 and a half-ish years, and, so I learned a lot there, but what I continued to find was kind of like twofold. One, working within the medical system and seeing like how the sausage is made in the background. It's like, mm, there's a lot of things going on here that just like didn't sit well with me. And I saw, you know, people were one, like falling through the cracks in the sense of like not being helped to their full potential.
Right.
And two, which might be even worse, like a lot of the people that were coming into the clinic or I'd also worked in the actual hospital itself, like in the ICU and working with people post surgical and actually even on the labor and delivery unit. Um, and just so many stories and so many limiting beliefs about our own capacity for healing and our own kind of like power within ourselves being like this separation this kind of like medical institution creating a wedge
Mhm.
between the person and their autonomy and like their ability to feel like they have control over their body and they have control over their healing and they have an active role in it
Mhm.
and I am very independent and I don't like to be told what to do or think. So
I think that
I
must be a light worker thing. I don't know.
that must be. We just see the bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like, no. We're not doing that. I am not the one for
Mhm.
that. So anyway, it gave me a lot of good experience and I think you it gave me the experience to really see people from all walks of life and see kind of make create these patterns, like see these patterns of either healing that didn't make sense in my like scientific, analytical, definition or progression.
Mhm.
And then also in, the people who should have been getting better because it was very specific, structurally whatever they had, but yet they weren't getting better. There was something missing
Mhm.
to, like, their recovery and their program. And so it's actually when I used to have, a client that I would see, and I would probably see her, like, I don't know, maybe twice a year for a few months, and she had chronic back pain, and we would do all the things, and she would do her exercises for the most part, and, we'd get her to a certain point where she was feeling, like, good, but
Mm,
it wasn't, like, consistent or 100% all of the time,
right.
and then she'd come back, like, for something else or for the same thing, like, I don't know, 6 months later or something like that.
Mhm.
Well, in one of the spans, and this went on probably for a few years, and then randomly, I was walking through the clinic and I saw her, and I said, "Oh, like, what are you doing here?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm going upstairs." We also had occupational therapy. And she's like, "But I have to tell you something." I said, "Okay, what's
Mhm.
going on?" And you know, as a PT, we get to spend more time with our clients, and that's actually why I went into PT versus, like, MD or, that and some other reasons, but,
Right.
because I wanted to have more time, I wanted to make a connection with people, like, I
Yeah,
wanted to feel that.
more of a
Um,
relationship.
yeah, and not be, like, rushed for a 15-minute, like, in and out, which is literally how medical students are trained. They're
Mhm.
trained to do everything in 15 minutes, and that includes listening, allowing the other person to talk. I'm like, "No, that's not for me." So anyways, she says, "I have to tell you something." I said, "Okay, what do you have to tell me?" She said, so we've had grown, like, closer over the last few years, and I got to know her situation. She was taking care of her mother, who was ill
Mhm.
for, like, many years. She told me, "My mother passed away." I said, "Oh, I am so sorry, are you okay?" Like, y she says, "Yeah, it was a long time coming," and, shared her feelings around it. She was like, "But what I actually really wanna tell you is that when she passed away,
Pain went away?
like, my back pain went completely away."
Yeah,
She was like, I have no back pain now."
yeah, the burden of taking care of her mother.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the first little that may not have been the first light, but that was the first big light in
Mhm,
my brain that I
mhm.
was like, "Hold on a second."
There's a link between stress and
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
when I was
there's
first
something
doing
here.
massage, I remember I went to my brother and massaged his shoulders, um, after, like, I visited or I was in massage school. He was living at home at the time, but he wasn't really working yet. He was just working at Barnes& and Noble kind of, like, before he became a real adult, and he had no stress, and I went to squeeze his shoulders, and he was like, "Ah," because he was, like, mushy. He was soft. I was too strong. And then he started working in the city and commuting, and, when he got a real job, and I went to massage his shoulders, and they were like a brick. And so it was like the difference of that. And then the reverse story was my husband's aunt. She was running her own hair salon, so the business plus the work, her shoulders were like a brick, like terribly, terribly tight. And then when she retired and closed her business, I went to massage her. It was like a different body. So that I've seen that too, where it's like, holy crap, like it's very apparent, like the toll stress takes on the body. So
Yeah, definitely, and it's actually really funny. So that was, like, the first I don't know, the first 3 years of my practice as
mhm,
a physical therapist, but my first mentor, if you will, that was a PT, like, I worked in undergrad in his clinic
mhm,
as an aide in Florida, and, he was actually the first person to, like, open me up to that connection, like,
yeah,
and also, like, that spiritual connection. So, like, he had actually somebody who did Reiki come into the office, like, for clients to see, and then as, like, a bonus or whatever, like, as a treat to workers, he would give us, like, either a massage or, whatever with the person with Reiki, and I was like, "Oh, like, I'll try Reiki." I'd never heard of it. I was like, "I don't even know what this is, but it's,
yeah,
like, sounds interesting. Like,
yeah,
sure, I'll
sure.
give it a I'll give it a try." And so I remember my experience, it wasn't I mean, I wouldn't say it's, like, neutral, but because there was, like, cool things, but then also I came out of it and, like, my neck was, like, not feeling great afterwards, so I was like, "Alright, this I'm not gonna do that again."
Yeah,
Like, I don't because that's what happened afterwards, but I remember and she really didn't tell me looking back now, actually, as I reflect, even like with my clients that like I do energy work on, she didn't like prime me or tell me, and he didn't really tell me either, like what the session was going to even entail. So I
Right.
had no idea. I was face down. I couldn't see her, and I had no idea like what was actually going to happen. And I remember feeling like a feather like along my back.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought in my head, as I was face down, I was like, is this part of the treatment? Like, does she have a feather on my back right now? Because I had that.
Yeah.
And so I asked her afterwards, I was like, did you like touch me with a feather? Because
Yeah.
she didn't actually physically touch me.
Right.
She worked off the body
Yeah. Some
exclusively.
people do that. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I do a
I
combination,
do too.
but
Mostly prefer to be on, but it's like it works when it's off too. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
She's like, I
totally. And
wasn't
so
using a
whatever.
feather.
She was like, I wasn't using a feather, and I was like, okay. I was probably like how I was probably like 19 or 20
Hmm.
when that happened. It was like my first year or two into college.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I left with like a crick in my neck, or I had like a crick in my neck. I remember getting in my car and being like, ugh. I was like, all right, well, I don't need this. So she may have just I actually haven't
Move
even
something
looked back to
along. Yeah.
yeah, maybe she did that. But she also didn't tell me like
Yeah.
what to expect afterwards. So it was just
Right.
kind of like a, whatever. So, anyways, but yeah, he actually recommended the book by Carolyn Miss, The Anatomy of the Spirit,
Yeah.
and that was probably my first introduction. I mean, that was definitely my first introduction to marrying the
Right.
body and the spirit, and the body, the physical body, as being like, a messenger, really,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
we need to tune into.
Right.
So, yeah, and I took it as like, I mean, back then I just took it as like, yeah, like this is really cool, but I really didn't have any outlet or anywhere to go with it.
Mhm.
And so I was still very and just even in my I'm very analytical in nature. I think I like to think about thinking, and I like to
Mhm.
analyze, and I like to see patterns and all of this type of stuff. And so I just really like, and that is what was rewarded like within not only society but also in like my family system.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
really just continued to lean into that
Right.
and really saw like my spiritual interest as like just like a hobby, just
Right.
like things that interested me but that I didn't really feel like integrated
Mhm.
into my being. They still felt like a bit separate.
Right.
So
But
So yeah. So yeah,
it
so I mean that's how I kind of started.
that's where, like, yeah, just even, like, the interest was, like, picked or whatever, like, interesting.
Yeah.
But then what about this is just for my own curiosity, like, where did
Yeah.
the doula stuff come in? Or, or like you
Mm.
said, you were in a hospital, like, for women or whatever, but, like,
Mhm.
that part of why you were there because of the birthing and the doula stuff, or you were just there because it was part of the PT, like, overall? Like
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up because I remember in my last year of PT school, in my last year, we did all clinicals for the most part. That was most of the year, and I was in a hospital system that a sister hospital had a women and children's hospital that I got to go and
mhm,
be at. Um, and I remember, I went to school in Florida. I'm from Florida, saying to me, like, once I left that day, I saw, like, the range of, like, women's health services,
mhm,
and I remember thinking, like, "I want to work in a women's hospital. I
mhm,
want to do that. That's what I
yeah,
want to do." I remember having that thought and, like, putting that intention,
mhm,
and not and then just kind of, like, continuing to go on. And so we moved to Albuquerque for my husband's job, kind of a surprise. We didn't know what was gonna happen. I had just gotten engaged to him, like, 3 months before we moved, and we didn't even know where he was gonna be at that point either. We had just both of us graduated from our programs, and, lo and behold, the only women's hospital in the state is where I was gonna be in the state,
Mhm.
And I actually interviewed there for a position. They only had part-time, so I had to say no. And so I was like, "Ah," I was, like, so close. And then they called me actually a week or 2 later and was like, "Actually, somebody just put in their resignation, like, do you wanna come work full time?" And and I've had these, synchronicities, like, all
That's my
throughout my
soul sis
life.
my soul sister
Yeah,
manifestation.
that's right, exactly.
Oh, yeah,
And
and side note, me and Zazu are both, earth signs, and our number is 17, so there's something about that, and our faces even kinda look similar in some way,
they
even though,
do.
yeah, things just work out. I
It
just showed up at the gym like, "Do you guys have a massage therapist?" And they kinda laughed, they're like, "Why? No, do you wanna be our," and I was like, "Yeah," and then it's just like, I got a job, like, I
like,
just
it's
it just works out, man.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, we're powerful, and,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was, the first thing, and I was just like, "Yeah." I was like, "I know that is not a coincidence." I
Yeah,
was like, "I know," and this was before I had any, language, I
right.
didn't have, even, the language to,
Yeah,
I was just like, "I definitely did that. I
yeah.
definitely did." But, I did that even with my husband at the same time, we could go into so many stories, but anyways, so I was in that women's hospital because I knew I wanted to be in a women's hospital. I just had that calling, I
Mhm.
felt it
Yeah.
once I had that experience,
Mhm.
and always throughout my life, there has been this, relationship, this, connection to birth in particular. Um First, a lot of, I think, fear and uncertainty. And so in my nature, in my analytical whatever nature, I'm a type A. If there's something that, I'm uncertain or scared about, I'm gonna research it to the ends of the earth, and I'm gonna figure out, whatever it is I need to figure out to, hit it head on. That's my personality. I'm not, an avoidant hider when it comes to my personal, challenges.
Mhm.
Um, Relationships were different. So, but in terms of this, so that's actually, kind of so it all just ended up happening that I had this calling for, women's health in particular, and I started a pregnancy specific program within the hospital that they didn't have, which I was like, "How are you a women's hospital and you don't have this?" They had pelvic floor therapists, but they didn't have anybody to actually hold and support pregnant people for everything else that happens during pregnancy. Um, and I always from then, I was like, I really feel called for, like, to attend birth,
Yeah.
but working within a hospital system, it's just was not logistically just didn't work when you have, a 9 to 5 job, you birth doesn't come 9 to 5.
Right.
So, it was actually really only when I opened up my own business that then I could have complete control over my schedule, that I then went and became certified and started attending births.
Okay.
And so that's how that all happened. But I would say, the spark happened then once
Mhm.
I really started working with more pregnant people at that
Yeah.
time. And I had a lot of pregnant people, of my pregnant moms, being like, "Can you just come to the birth with me? Can you
Yeah.
just come?"
Yeah.
And that's probably, and I was like, I would love to, but I have a job.
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
show up for.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of how that all happened. And I think for me, the birth doula, again, my analytical nature being like, yeah, no, I want to see what the deal is. I want to be there and I want to see. But more than that, I don't know. I think I've always felt from when I was really young, I want to see people. I see people, when I'm with someone, I I just hold, the space, which I never had words, and
Yeah.
now I do at this, point in my life and career, but I always felt called and just, I would just do it naturally, holding the space, just
Mhm.
holding the
Yeah.
space for somebody,
Right.
and just so happens that our maternity system does not do that. In
Yeah.
fact, does the opposite most of the time,
Yeah.
and so, you know That's just a natural transition to be able to hold. I mean, what more important time is there to hold the space for somebody,
Yeah.
like when they're giving birth, when somebody is being birthed, and when somebody, I would say, when somebody is transitioning out of this physical body.
Yeah.
So,
When, like, so in the last, what, like, couple years since you started your own personal business, did you know that you were gonna try to, I mean, I don't know that are you primarily women and pelvic floor, or are you like, I know you're a medley of lots of things and all of them at once, but it's like,
mhm,
do you mostly like, you're you're looking to steer more towards like pelvic floor and like pregnancy and like doulaship, like as that's your whole focus? Because I mean, obviously, I went to see you for my shoulder and because I knew that you could help.
mhm.
You know, on your questionnaire, you had all pelvic floor stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna get these questions because I I want to get into it. Like, it's a lot. There's a lot. You know, the two births that I had were lots of complicated details that I was like, why is this relevant? I just want my shoulder worked on. And then you were like, it is relevant, but that's okay. You can skip over it. But like, are you like that's more your desire is to be in that role versus just like a standard? I know for sure you don't want to just be standard PT. Like that's it's too limited.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah,
is it more like that's like really what lights you up is just supporting one-on-one women in especially when they're pregnant and postpartum.
yeah, basically, and it's been quite a journey for me because, I mean, just even going through, like, the rigors of getting my doctorate in PT, I remember, like, um, not wanting to specialize, like, feeling especially resistant to specializing because I was like, "I just paid and I'm going to continue to pay a
Mhm.
lot of money for this
Yeah.
degree," and to, like, basically when a lot of times when you specialize, like, your other skills that you learn, they just don't get used that often.
Mhm.
So in my again, I felt resistant initially, but it all worked out because yes, so at this point, like, my highest calling and my highest purpose is to support people on their, like, motherhood journey, wherever they are, whether they're in preconception, which I've been doing a lot of work around that, and I see the need for it actually, to be out there more
Yeah.
in the world. So, and but I'm trying to think, like, so I've been working with pregnant folks since, like, 2016.
Mhm.
And so it's evolved and kind of changed, and I've added more things on, and I've always seen orthopedic people, and I've done a lot of work around, like, the nervous system in particular when it comes to pain, but also when it comes to how our bodies work, which I think is a big gap and is also a big gap in pregnancy and
Mhm.
birth in
Mhm.
particular,
Yeah.
actually, honestly, even parenting. But yes, and I've come to this point, all of that, like, basically has come to this point where, my highest calling really is to work people along, like, their entire motherhood journey. So, and that includes into, like, our wise woman years.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, that is my highest calling. It doesn't mean that I won't see particular, folks who have,
Mhm.
like, orthopedic issues or women in particular who have, like, orthopedic issues. I still even will see men for pelvic floor issues. But it's not where really most of my energy is anymore.
Well, like
So,
in my experience with being in the craniosacral world, the craniosacral therapists, um, those who gather in those classes can be, you know, in my when I first began, I was more in the neutral territory of like, I'm a massage therapist. And I saw the weird energy people like me now,
yeah.
and I was like, those people are weird. That's the first time I heard
Yeah.
crystals and stuff. And then there was the PTs. And then my most recent craniosacral class that I took, I found the PT so rigid and didn't like
Mhm.
being around them. I was like, where are my Reiki people at? You know, like I found unconsciously, you know, not deliberately, but I just kind of found the energy people in the craniosacral world versus the PT people who are like, but why and how many times and how long and
Uh-huh.
my God, like, just follow the body, you know?
Yeah.
So I had a hard time with that. So I could see like how it could be like frustrating and limiting to like only look at one system. And like that's what I love about you and what you brought to our sessions is like not only did you just, start out in a standard PT approach, which, was fine. Like
Yeah.
I'll do all these rep and I still suck at that. But like just doing the exercises in a regimented manner and everything, but then to be like incorporating the dry needling and the energy work and then just your intuition is like, okay, I think this is about your mom. And then like energetically you're seeing the leaking, like the almost like there was like she described it as a pipe in my shoulder that was just had a slow leak.
Mhm.
And then that told you that it was just a grief thing because I quit everything over Christmas break and it was still an issue. So it was
Mhm.
just cool that you had that insight and you do body work like I do, where you get cool visuals and you just interpret them and stuff. So that was probably more helpful than any of the PT, like or
Yeah.
just as helpful, because it was like integrating the energy and like the cause, the root
Mhm.
issue instead
Mhm.
of just doing exercises and not letting the underlying thing rise to the surface. So that's what's like really special about
Exactly.
offering is that you bring all those things together. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really see, like, the PT, and that's where I was in internal conflict, like, because, like, we are trained, and if you're trained through, like, the Western medical system, it's like, it's all structural, and even in my training, like, we talked about there's a system called, like, the biopsychosocial model of care, which is, there's the bio, which is, like, the structural, then there's, like, the psycho, which is, like, the mental,
Mhm,
state, emotional, and, the social, so, like, how you interact in the world and, all of those things, and even that was, like, when I was going through school, like 2012 to 2015, that was like we learned about it, but like nobody knew how to translate that into practice. And that is what I'm seeing through the PT realm is that there is this like because so many people like PTs in general, like or massage therapists, like anybody who works on the body or with the body, it's like you're called to the body because you know the body has like this capacity for not even just healing, but just like it's just an amazing thing. It's just a beautiful, amazing thing. And so, but the way that we're taught about the body is so kind of like separated and because it's
mhm,
easier to learn different systems in separation, but we know that like systems don't work in separation. They're all interconnected and even with like the nervous system and things like that, like even now most PTs don't know how to integrate like okay, how do I work with the nervous system? Which, in my view, through my evolution, I just think is like your internal intuitive highway.
mhm,
Um, so it's like, yeah, we can talk about science, and science will maybe come along, like I will continue to come along to explain some of the things that we already freaking know. Like,
right,
we know,
right.
we just know, you know? But
Totally.
it's like but it creates this, like, separation, that's what I was talking about too, like, within my work within the hospital system, but even within, like, my schooling, it's like this separation and this, like, pushing of,
Mhm,
like, you've got to be you're the one in control of somebody else's experience and of
mm,
somebody else's healing. There's a difference between, like, taking accountability and being a guide for somebody and taking accountability as a practitioner to, like, work in the most, like, authentic and for their best benefit type of way.
mhm,
And then there's this, which is what most of us come out with, that, like, we're made to feel like we're responsible for their healing, which means like we have the power
right.
and they
Mhm.
are,
They're just at
like,
your whim, yeah, kind of a thing. Yeah.
which is so one disempowering for like the person, like the client, but also it puts so much pressure on
Responsibility on you as the healer.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. you know, and you're like,
it's a collaborative thing, and it really is up to the person who's the client to take charge. Like, it's like,
exactly.
I'm like, if I don't do my exercise,
Yeah, I don't get mad at you.
it's
I'm
going
like,
really slow. Oh, yeah, 'cause, you're not doing the work, Karen. I did do some
"Nah,
exercises yesterday, and I felt sore that night, and I go, "Oh, yeah, so I should be feeling sore because I wasn't doing enough reps," you know? It's annoying to feel sore, though. That's why people are lazy.
it. I get it. I get it. And I think you need to feel sore all the time, right? But sometimes, and what I see the PT as and what I've evolved with in terms of like my PT background, and generally that's where I meet a lot of people. Like that's the initial common ground that I meet a lot of people
What is
at.
what is
That the kind of like PT perspective, like physical body education,
Mhm,
connecting with their body, um, in ways that empower them to use their body
mhm,
and not be afraid of it. And
mhm.
that's generally like where I meet people, and what I have added through my like, energetic, intuitive, spiritual evolution is like, okay, now take it deeper
Right.
and use your body
Mhm.
as a channel for your nervous system, which is your like intuition highway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's so
like
cool.
opening it up to the version of myself, I would say like 10 years ago. I mean, hell, maybe even like 3 years ago, that was like, all right. I mean, I guess I always kind of knew, but I felt disconnected to a sense. And I also felt like there's no integration. Like, I don't know how to integrate these things, but like really being able to take what was, a longer journey and help people to kind of like
Yeah, bring it
make
together
it
faster.
shorter for them, make it
Yeah,
more efficient,
yeah, yeah,
for whatever each person's journey is different, right? And some people walk around their entire life disconnected from their bodies, and
oh,
there's different reasons for that, from their bodies and from their intuition, from both of them.
yeah,
And there's a lot of reasons. There's not a lack of reasons why people can walk around this way, but there is an abundance of opportunity for
mhm,
you to reconnect and heal what needs to be healed, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, and ideally, all of those things are happening together. So ideally, you're open to all three of those
right. Yeah,
happening
you really wanna,
simultaneously.
yeah, get to the root of things, or to really dissect it and not just almost like slap a Band-Aid on it. Like, my
Yeah.
uh, my oldest struggles with sleep, but it's because of her lifestyle, and it makes me crazy because it's like
Mhm.
exercise, if you get outside time, if you have a normal sleep schedule, none of those things matter. She just wants something to sleep. So she saw her
Mhm.
doctor yesterday, and the doctor's like, "Oh, you can take Benadryl every night." And she's like, "I'm gonna go buy Benadryl." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you got your answer, you got your one pill fix, but that's not the freaking way to do it." But
Uh-huh.
some people don't even want to, like, so I deal with it in my own family. It's so frustrating. But like, people don't recognize like the link between the two, and they're mind, body, spirit, man. It's one whole thing. So I
Yeah.
that's what's
Yeah.
special about you, because you're able to bring in all these layers for people to heal and go deep and address, the root of things. And you can, I think you gave yourself permission to go slow, so you can listen to your own intuition, so you can be a better guide for your clients by just getting quiet and taking time to do the energy work within your sessions too. And that, I'm sure, is
Yeah.
really powerful and enlightening for them. So, yeah,
Definitely.
it's like, "Oh,
Definitely.
I have my 12 PT visits covered by insurance, and, after 12 visits, I'll be done." It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not always how it goes.
I mean, that's not always how it goes, and I think for me, and just in, like, the way that I am as well, just in my personality, is, like, I, am always in search for balance, and so for me, and then also having my medical background, and this is where I feel very like it's very useful, is in helping people to navigate, like, "Okay, like, you need some short-term support, like, maybe this makes sense." But, for a little while in terms of, like, medication or, things that are kind of Band-Aids,
Right.
like the one pill
Yeah.
fixes that aren't actually fixes.
Right.
But that could help to like support you for a little
To
while.
get
And
through,
even
to
like
get over the hump or whatever, that piece of
and even
time.
like the exercise, like exercise prescription. Obviously, exercise as a whole could be a whole nother conversation, but like the specific exercises for the specific things that you're dealing with, like, those are meant to be supportive and to support your evolution.
Right.
You never, I mean, I never work with people where I'm like, okay, you have to do this specific exercise program for the entirety of your life.
Yeah.
My like, but this is kind of like this is a lot of where the medical system kind of lacks is the ability to like take people from the like, okay, I'm just going to tend to your needs like that right now, but like have them actually reintegrate into their life in a way where they're more whole, like
Mhm.
they're more of a whole complete being
Right. Right.
versus like, I'm just gonna slap this band-aid on you and like just keep doing what you're doing. No. How
Yeah.
did you get here?
Right.
Like,
And that's what
how
you
did you
you
get
said to me. You're like, "How many years was your shoulder hurting you? And you're hoping to be all better in 2 months?" Like, it's
right?
been years. Like, I didn't even know when it started. It's been so long, Obviously, it
Yeah.
probably started after my mom died. But, like, that was 6 years ago. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, gotta look at the whole picture here. Don't just look for quick fixes.
Yeah, and that goes both ways because I feel like and it's actually really funny because I came across a post yesterday actually from the girl you told me about, Kristen
Crystal.
something with the stones.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and she was
Kristen
saying
Mitchell.
how like cord cutting is like outdated. That was like her
Mhm,
thing. And
mhm.
she was talking about it in the sense that like if you don't look at the underlying reason why the cords are being formed in the first place and you just keep like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna keep cutting them, like,
Yeah.
whatever, then it's like, all right, you're gonna get like relief for a little while, but then they're always gonna get reformed. And I'm like, that's how I feel about the body as well and the connection. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, if you're doing it for like right exercise, general health, very important. We need to move our bodies. We were made to move our bodies. When we don't move our bodies, we have problems. So there's that. But if you don't actually look at continue to look at the underlying reasons why your body's giving you a certain message or giving you a certain experience or sensation, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you're kind of just like bullshitting yourself, and you
Yeah.
can't bullshit your body, which is what I tell people. So can only do it for so long.
So do you wanna talk about, like, what got you into the spiritual stuff? Like, which kinda so, okay, when I first met Zazu, she walked into my
Hmm.
store. It must have been on a Saturday when I didn't have Diane helping me, and, I think we spoke for, like, almost 2 hours or something. That's just how we roll. That was our first
Yeah.
and you were interested in taking the spiritual seekers class, so you were getting that
Mhm.
intuitive kinda nudge to
Yeah.
delve, and that was, like, less than a year before your grandma passed, right? So it was kind of,
Yes.
and
It
then so go ahead. I just wanted to say that part.
it was so strong. It was so strong. I was actually just journaling about that this morning. Like, I felt such a strong desire, like, just like this, like, impulse.
Mhm.
Actually, that's the better word for it. It felt
Yeah.
like an impulse
Mhm.
of, like the words are just like, I just wanna connect with my gut. Like, I just feel disconnected from, like, my gut, like, my intuition. I don't mean, like, gut health, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, just, like, that
Yeah.
gut feeling, that gut intuition.
Right.
Um, and just and I fought it for a while because that was, like, at the beginning of 2022 that I, like,
Mhm.
had that feeling, and
Mhm.
for whatever reason, maybe it was, like, the business, whatever, like, I was just, like I fought it for a while, and then I came across a PT, in New Jersey, her name's Kathy, who was teaching Reiki for PTs,
Okay.
a class for Reiki for PTs. And I looked at the agenda, like I looked at the objectives and I looked at whatever, and I was like, you know what? Like, I feel like I should do this. I was like,
Yeah.
I feel like I should do this. And and what's crazy is that, like I said, I was looking back because time is weird with me. So like it feels like shorter times feel like longer times and
Mhm.
vice versa. So I looked back and I actually looked at like, okay, when did I pay for that class?
Right.
Which was like for me, things always happen in like September is
Yeah,
a
well,
big
that's your
month for
birth month,
me.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and my anniversary month, and, like, opportunities and, like, just it's an expansion month, always,
Mhm.
has always been. Anyways, it was, like, in September that I took Reiki 1 with her,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Of course it would be in
Yeah.
September," that I whatever, that I finally, like, made the call to do it,
Mhm.
and then I looked up, I was like, "When did I take the spiritual seekers?" And it was, like, started, like, October 4th, like,
Yeah.
right afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my god, this is all happening." I, like, just decided to just, like, "F it," like, "We're going in, like, we're just
Yeah.
gonna do it."
Yeah.
But it was probably, like, a solid, 6 to 8 months prior that I had been feeling that, like, drum beat inside of me, and I had been, like, resisting it
Right.
for whatever reason, and then I finally was just like, "You know what? Like, I'm just gonna I'm, like, ready to do whatever it is," and then that opportunity appeared, and then you appeared, and I was like, "Alright, like, this is it. Like, this is what" I just intuitively kinda felt like,
Yeah.
again, before having any of these words, I was just like, "Yeah, I think I should do this," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And then what
So
happened?
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
With the
Yeah, so that's, like yeah, so my grandmother, who was really my first spiritual teacher, in reflection this morning, both in so I grew up Catholic and both in like, the Catholic framing, but also in the like supernatural
Mhm.
occurrences, because she would always tell me she could see, like, spirits
Oh,
and she can
cool.
see things, but she never really, like, explained it to me, and she never really, like so it always kinda was, like, left me feeling a little uncomfortable, like, "You can see these, but, like, you don't know what they're about? Like, what do you mean? Like, there's this lady over your bed who's, like, laughing, like, at you, like, that you don't know. Like, what do you mean?"
Yeah.
And so anyways, so she, over about a 2.5-year period, she really declined in her health. My mother was taking care of her in Florida, and she basically lost, like, her ability to speak, her ability to do everything that we do that makes us independent as humans. And so, I think when you watch, like, a loved one like that go through something like that, it just really opens up parts of you that just have never really kind of been accessed in that way, and so for me, um, you know, that really I think about, like, she passed in 2023 in April, will be coming up a year now here soon, but I was really, like, grieving her for, like, way before her actual,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
physical
Yeah.
death.
Same with my
Yeah,
mom. Yeah.
yeah, um, and again, I didn't have really words then, but it opened like, that grief was like a gift to open me up
Mhm.
to, like, my spirituality and to actually, like, allow myself to go there,
Mhm.
and to integrate
Mhm.
what has always, like, been there, but I have very successfully, like, you know, put it away, and only in ways that, like, I, felt comfortable with. So I always was obsessed with, like, supernatural. I would love to go on ghost tours whenever we'd go to, like, different places, like, everything supernatural, everything magic, everything astrology, like, all of these things, and I would listen to my grandmother's stories, and I would listen to her husband, so my grandfather who passed before I was born, he would, channel, like, through writing, and I would listen to the stories like my mom would tell me or whatever about him, but again, there
Who
wasn't like
who
this
channeled him?
no, like he would get messages
Oh, he
and
was
he
he
would just
channeled. Okay. I thought you were saying that
yeah,
somebody channeled his spirit. So he was a
yeah,
channeler. Okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
and so yeah, which is really cool, but again, like there was no like kind of understanding around it, and so it was just kind of something that like was a thing, like normalcy, but also like a bit of trepidation around. And so for me, um, I always remember feeling like energies and feeling like presences
Mm-hmm.
and being like, I don't know who this is. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what this is. And then kind of like with the Catholic background and the Hispanic background, there's like a lot of fear around this kind of stuff as well. Like, I would just put the sheets over and be like, I would just start praying. Like, and what's funny is I would imagine a bubble around me and
Mm-hmm.
around my body, which
Yeah.
is something that I do now,
Yeah.
like to like
Yeah.
clear my energy. But
Right.
like I did, as a child when I was scared,
I
and
was
feeling
scared
like,
little when I was little too. When you told that story the other day, because when we did the Reiki 2 class, I had Zazu sitting in on
mm,
it just for fun. But because you already got your master's with this other lady. But
yeah,
um when you were telling that story about being scared of spirit when you're little, I'm like, holy shit, that was me too. I was always scared at night and I always needed a light on. And I was like,
mm-hmm,
I wasn't feeling nothing, like,
yes,
and like, and not
uh-huh,
like, I don't remember anything bad happening or scary happening, but I must have sensed their energies of my guides.
mm-hmm,
I don't think it was anything bad. It was probably like my family, on the other side.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
like, it was just unnerving, because you could feel it. So you'd be like, go away, no, 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 So like I protected myself for like the first like 20 years of my life, being like, no, you're not allowed,
yes,
So and now you're like, never
same.
mind. Yeah.
Right, yeah, now I'm like, and that was the thing, and that was actually the first thing I had to overcome in,
Mm-hmm.
like, my spiritual journey, my very, like, overt spiritual journey was, like, that fear of, like, allowing something in that I don't want to be there. That
Right.
that kind of thing, because I had actually also had experiences, and we are, you know, the vibration we hold and the beliefs we hold is like what we see in the world, I
Right.
think. And I mean, I think that's a pretty well, established
Yeah.
concept. And so like I have these stories of like I remember in 2016 when I was actually doing like one of my like I was actually my first like kind of birth doula training through the PT world. One of the girls in my class that I went to dinner with was actually a medium, and she was also a death doula, which I
Mm.
thought first time I ever heard about that, and I was like, "Oh,
Right.
that's cool."
Yeah.
Um, but she was telling me, and she was from New Jersey, and she was telling me this story of like spirit that she interacted with, and that she basically had to like leave the house because the spirit like wanted her child or something like that. And she was like, "No, you cannot, whatever." Anyways, this whole story, so she told her husband they had to leave the house or back out of the sale or something like that. And the next family, like a few months in, their child like drowned in the tub.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So like that's the stuff. And then I had some other experiences that were like kind of scary. Actually, when I walked into your shop when
Mm-hmm.
we first met, I had just had a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Um like different, but like of that like kind of dark nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it freaked me out, and I was like, "Whoa, pump
Yeah.
the brakes, like, this is not okay." But then later, actually, having worked with, like, dream work, and, like, lucid dreaming, I actually came to understand what that dream was, and it wasn't, like, a bad energy, it was, like, a message, a very strong get my attention type of message of, like, the situation that was happening with my grandma and my mom, and, like, the pattern that I could fall into if I wasn't more vigilant about
Oh wow.
where I gave my energy.
Yeah, yeah, your
So,
balance. Yeah.
but, like, that's the vibration where I was working from, and that was, like, so that's how I interpreted it,
Right.
and so that really, like, continued to be something that I had to work through. And so I think it was with you and like your classes, between you and Kathy, like, you know, and the learning of protecting your energy, like cleaning out, it's just like hygiene. It's
Yeah,
just like basic hygiene.
totally. Totally.
And you have control over that.
Mhm.
And you have intention over that. Whereas before, I'd never been exposed to, no one ever taught me that. So it was just kind of like this thing that you were like, well, if you get a bad luck of the draw, like you might have somebody curse
Yeah.
you or
Yeah.
like something
Right.
like that,
Right. Right.
So,
I know. So
yeah.
people actually you can be empowered. You just have to realize it's a choice. Like
You're right.
crazy.
Exactly.
It's so crazy. So
Crazy.
what are the many things that like in the last year and a half, what have you accomplished? Oh my God, you've done so much.
Oh my God.
Well, it's only been a year, not even a year and a half, but you've taken on so
I mean,
many
yeah,
courses.
2022. Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah, so I mean, yeah, I guess year and a half. Yeah. So yeah, I have like my Reiki. Reiki is really like kind of where I started and what kind of opened me up and was so supportive um throughout my grandmother's like last 6 months, six
mm,
to 7 months, in opening up like my own intuition and my own like basically like channel to like hearing and knowing um things that were either going to happen and slash or like the ways that I needed to move in the spaces I needed to be in and the steps I needed to take. But yeah, I mean, so that was really the first, and then I really dove deep. I think it was starting I made a commitment. I'd always been in and out of astrology, but I'd never really like made there's so much with astrology. So I never really made like a full-on commitment to really like learn it deeply. So I made that commitment in 2023 at the beginning in January. And so just going through and Deborah Silverman and Ocean Pleasant is her name, who also learned from Deborah Silverman, have been really great resources and teachers in that aspect. And then I started integrating my human design. Actually, I was even exposed to it at some point in 2023. I remember listening to a podcast on an airplane on my way to my grandmother
mhm,
'cause I was in and out of Florida for many times over the last, whatever 2 years of her life,
right.
to support the family. So, I remember listening about it and I was like, "Huh, that's really cool, and that makes sense," but then kind of forgetting about it with everything else. But then in the last probably 5 months, 5 or 6 months, have been, like, really reintegrating it, and now I'm gonna start, like, basically integrating it and certifying in it,
Right.
to be able to help other people as well with that. And then, I mean, the and I use like all these different modalities, and there's then the breath work, which is like the metamorphosis method, which honestly has been life changing for me. And so that's probably the thing I'm most excited about, to start to work with my clients using that
Right.
specifically.
To help move energy,
But
pull out the origin of issues or to intend to work towards an issue with the breath work to kind of shift that energy more quickly. That's kind
Yeah,
of
shift that energy more quickly, and then even, like, the way what I really love about it is that you have to be in your body,
Mhm.
also get to be, like, in your intuition
Right.
when you're doing it. So it's
Mhm.
not just, like, one or the other, it's really everything, and you like, in terms of, like, that body energy, like, spirit connection, even, like, the mental aspect of it.
Mhm.
So powerful. And so
And then
yeah,
when did you learn the dry needling?
yeah, so the dry needling I started to bring on at the end or no, not even like midway through last year.
Okay, and maybe just
So,
to explain what that is in case people don't know.
yeah, sure. So dry needling is basically using something called a monofilament needle, which is if you've ever had acupuncture, most people know about acupuncture. It's the same type of needle. It's called a dry needle because you're not injecting any sort of it's not like a flu shot or something like that. You're not injecting anything into the body. It's just like the needle. And really the way that I was trained, there's a few different like schools of thought with dry needling. But this is something that physical therapists can use as a modality to help, with tissue health. Um, but the way I was trained was actually, yes, that, but also to help regulate your nervous system and to help regulate basically like your body's ability to bring its immune function back online, which is a function of your nervous system, and help the tissues heal as well. So, I also think there is definitely some sort of energetic component to it. But when you're learning things through the PT lens, it's always, the structural. But this the way I learned, so which was through the integrative arts coursework, is really using it to help regulate your nervous system. And I mean, I've seen people heal from the weirdest like injuries and accidents and things like so much faster with the dry needling. Like, just for example, there was a girl who actually had like an injury at whatever. They were like trying to inject lidocaine into her elbow because she was having like pain or some issues, but they actually like blew out like a vein.
Hmm.
And so it was really bad. And not only that, but the lidocaine itself like kind of acted as a bit of like like a poison in the area, like the actual tissue itself, like it went where it wasn't supposed to go.
Right.
And we dry needled her in specific points like the vagus nerve and the different in distributions, but also in and around that area. And within like 20 minutes, it was like 50% better.
Wow.
And she had it, like the injury had happened, I think like a month ago, like a
Mhm.
month prior.
Right.
So she was like still dealing with it at that point. And it was like
Wow.
the gnarliest, like you're like, what? How did another one of those moments where you're just like, what? How
Yeah.
did that like how did that happen? Like how did that help?
I
But
remember when you did it,
obviously,
when you like cornered my like the the peak of my issue or whatever.
yeah.
And all of a sudden it was
Uh-huh.
like I almost had like nowhere to run because as you said, it like ping ponged. So you hit all
Mhm.
these points in the path of the pain in my shoulder, and I was like, "Oh my god, it hurts bad. I gotta cry." And you're like, "So cry." And I'm like, "Cry." And I did. And I kind of had to because it hurt so much. But it was like
Uh-huh.
important, like you cornered it. It was like just release this shit that you've been storing. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was really
Yeah, and not
mm,
everybody cries. We'll say that, like with the
yeah.
needling. But like what happened with you is the same thing. Like you were holding into, like
Mhm.
you were holding a bunch of energy,
Yeah.
like emotion is energy in motion, like
Yeah.
there that like just needed to come out. And that same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
Um, it was when I got needled. It was like a week after I had been with my grandmother, like during a very like traumatic hospital stay. And
Mhm.
it was like an area that shouldn't have been like, it wasn't like so painful. It wasn't just like with your shoulder. It shouldn't have been like so much of an like of a pain or an experience that it triggered that, but
Yeah.
it did. And
Right.
I started crying
Yeah.
and like because like that is where I was holding
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Um so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, whatever way we need to get it out, like, I guess let's get it out. I try to be as gentle. I'm a gentle
I know, yeah,
soul, if
it's
you
not to
will.
paint a, intense image here of, like, what this was, like,
Yeah,
I don't even know what number, but probably, like, the 20th session. It wasn't, like, right
yeah,
away, and it just
yeah,
happened to land that day that way, but it was,
yeah.
like, grief, it's important. We have to feel our feelings.
We have to feel them, and if not, then that's where we start to get like dis-ease. So, feelings are meant to be felt
Mhm.
and integrated into the rest of your body, not just held, you know, in one specific spot. So but yeah, so I mean, when I work with people, I don't do everything all at once. I
Mhm.
really see like, okay, what is it? I marry like, okay, what are your physical symptoms? What is like physically happening right now? Okay, what about your life right now or your life in the past or your childhood or whatever, which the breath work really helps to get back to the childhood component of it, where subconsciously we've got a lot of things still working in the background. um, and what kind of regulation, what kind of like assistance and support can we give your body that's going to be the most supportive right now along your journey, and how can we kind of plan out, okay, what are you going to need to kind of travel this journey to get onto the other side and get whatever it is that you desire. And most of the people that I work with now is like getting the birth that they desire, having like the pregnancy or the postpartum,
Yeah.
experience that they desire. And I think a lot of people with pregnancy, but birth in particular, like there is a lot. I always, and I've been like preparing for birth for the last 10 years of my life. I feels like going through like the whole scientific route, initially. And what I'm learning, what I've been integrating and continuing to learn around recently with my own spiritual evolution is that there's actually, a lot of old patterning that birth, pregnancy is an opportunity for you to transform and heal.
Mhm.
But you have to be willing to look at it and name it first to
Mhm.
then allow it to be healed through your experience.
Yeah.
So, and that's basically where most of my work has been focused around. Um, so,
We should have a
so
whole
yeah,
episode on just that.
that would be, I mean, it's like so amazing talking about spirit babies, like, oh
Yeah.
my God, it would be amazing.
I know, because
And
it's like it's such a huge topic and like, you know, just I haven't ventured into I mean, I have addressed it, but like, having a baby by vacuum extraction, not having at all the birth I planned for my first pregnancy, and not wanting that same scenario recreated for my second. I was so focused on not having my first scenario that they sideswiped me with the freaking C-section.
Mhm.
So yeah, like
Yeah.
the whole conversation. And I've even had like a rebirth type experience through a craniosacral class, which was cool to like rewrite Andrew's story with, because they could tell that I
Mhm.
was too emotionally loaded to recreate the Grace story. They're like,
Mhm.
might be too much for our 10-minute demo. you know?
Right, right, right.
So I did the C-section as a rewrite, which was really neat. So yeah, we would have to do a whole, because I have to go soon.
No,
Okay. But like,
definitely,
but yeah,
definitely.
that would be great to dive into that
That'll
aspect.
be our next one.
It's such a chunky topic. It's so cool.
It
And
is, and it's like nuance, right? There's like so many layers to it, and there are some people, right, even like in the from preconception to birth and like postpartum and connecting to your intuition and being able to, depending on where you are birthing and who you are birthing with, like
mhm,
being able to know, like, okay, what are maybe some challenges you might meet? And when you're prepared for them, you can have a better
mhm.
advocacy strategy
Yeah,
on and co-creation to see to help yourself as much as you can.
and having somebody
So,
like
which
you
is
by their side to be a support and be an advocate and to physically be present, or at least coach them, in some way, or
mhm,
makes all the difference. So,
a, 1,000%, 1,000%.
my story is
So,
like 20 years old at this point and 17 years old. So what's
mhm,
available now and what's more acceptable now and whatever, is just a world of
mhm,
difference. So, but
totally.
where can people find you to like learn? And you have a program coming up. What's the program? Or like an online
Yeah. Yeah, so I have a couple things coming up. So if you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram. That's generally where I am at Dr. Zazu Cioce CPT with underscores. We can put that in the notes,
Yeah.
or I also put it in my name on the video if you're watching this on video. And that's where I have like a hub for pretty much everything that I do. But yeah, I actually have a birth and pregnancy community membership. So, where we combine both like the science and the physiology and like just knowing how our bodies actually work during birth, education that we need, but also the energetic patterning and evolution and release and rewiring that also like needs to happen, before we go into as we're pregnant and as we are going into birth, which is what I'm finding is like a beautiful marriage of the two. So it's called the Empowered Birth and Pregnancy Membership, and there is a 7-day free trial, so you could actually go and drive for 7 days. I do calls and all of that, like throughout the month, every month. And then I actually also have a birth dream shop experience coming up in April, starting April 2nd. So you have a birth coming up and or are terrified of birth and want to start preparing like me 10 years ago before I even was thinking about conceiving a baby, that experience and that container, I'm like giddy right now. I'm so excited about it because I honestly think it's the birth medicine that we need. So I'm really, really excited for anybody who jumps into that because it's going to be very powerful. So that's what I got going on right now.
That's
So if you're
awesome.
interested in any of that, you can actually you can reach out to me on Instagram, or you can email me at zazu@phoenixpt.info. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love chatting with you. You are my soul sister.
Oh, I'm so glad too. I knew we would talk to the last second. That's just how we roll. But
That is
yeah,
how we
you'll have to
roll.
come
So
back and
much.
and you have a podcast too, don't you?
That's right. That's right. I have the Vulva Village podcast.
Well, hopefully.
So
Yeah.
Vulva Village. That's right. So definitely women's health geared. We talked about all things like pelvic floor, but also I recorded some episodes lately around like IVF journeys and healing through birth and birth stories and those are going to come out soon. It's going to be really, really great. And then I have to have you on my podcast too.
Yeah.
We can talk about. Ooh, maybe that's where we can talk about birth stuff.
Yeah. I can always just
Oh,
like take that and share it to my podcast instead of doing it twice.
perfect.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like
Exactly.
it.
I like it. Done.
I love you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of
I'll
course.
see you
Mwah.
soon. Okay.